Thank you for being here. My name is Daniel McMahon. I'm also known as McMahon. I do work at New Relic on the product security team. I'm an application security engineer. This is my third BSides, Portland. So my first time talking, happy to be here. Just so you know, thank you. I am a terrible socializer, so if you have any questions afterward, please come up to me and throw something at me or yell at me, because I'll probably just be sulking in a corner somewhere. I'll be one of the 100 of us that are doing that. So I mentioned New Relic. Why does that matter? It's not a vendor pitch. I don't care who you use, what you use, but we are a pretty large SaaS company. We're kind of unique too. We're not Microsoft size, but we're also not a new startup. We're not one product to manage. We have a pretty large surface area, numerous products that all do very different things that operate on very different parts of the stack. Applications, servers, mobile deployed applications, JavaScript running in browsers, server software that is sending data to us. All of these things collect data and send it to our backend software. So the threat landscape for us is gigantic. We have all of our backend services we need to maintain. We have to worry about our code running on our customers' devices. We have to worry about our code running on our customers' devices. So suffice it to say, we take security seriously. It's not funny, it's true. We have multiple teams at the company who think about security constantly. We have our operations team who's dealing with the actual physical infrastructure, the data running over the wire, our servers, patches. We have a compliance team who's talking to our customers constantly, figuring out what things they need for us to build out. And then, of course, there's my team, product security, who is looking at code. We're doing code reviews every day. We are meeting with teams constantly. Basically just trying to get a handle on the 50+ teams and growing that we have at the company. But it's tough. There's only a few of us on any of those teams. There's not that many people, not that many eyes. So everything that we can do to increase the information coming into us is helpful. We try really hard internally within the company to build out a culture of security, to try and get advocates from other teams, teams that aren't necessarily teams with security in their name, engineers, salespeople, our support teams. Anybody who we can get thinking about security is helpful to us. So the point is, we're stronger with more people. We don't have that many people dedicated to security, but the more people we have thinking about it, the easier our job is. But even with all the work that we do internally, that's not always enough. So that brings us to coordinated disclosure. Coordinated disclosure is kind of a fancy name for bug bounties, but that takes a lot of different forms. Who here has some way for people to submit bugs to your company? That's awesome. I know you do. So it could just be an email address. We call that a vulnerability disclosure program, some way just for people to send something to you. If somebody comes across a bug on your site, accidentally or intentionally, they want a way to be able to just tell you about it. You may pay money, you may not. You may use a service like HackerOne. Doesn't matter. You have a way for people to actually submit stuff to you. The gist is that it's a safe way for researchers to disclose stuff to you without a fear of reprisal. That's the big thing. So we have had a bug bounty program for about 2.5 years now, almost 3 years. At first, we had a completely private program that we paid money out to. Well, we had a public program. We added a private program that we started paying cash to, and now we have a completely public program that we pay cash to. So we've been doing this for a while. We've had a lot of reports come in. We've dealt with a lot of different researchers from all over the world. So benefits-wise, it is a humongous force multiplier for small teams. We do assessments we have security researchers from big firms that we trust come and poke at our products. We'll give them our source code sometimes. We'll let them do everything they can to pen test a specific product. But assessments can only catch so much stuff. We've been around for a decade now. Our products are very mature. So repeat assessments don't always find anything new. People kind of get stuck in the same thought processes a lot. Even trying to rotate vendors around, which we do. Eventually, they've ran their run books. They've done what they know. But the really unique thing is you get a completely different perspective from random people on the internet who are submitting stuff to you. These aren't always people who are professionally involved in security. These aren't always people who have any kind of formal training. They're going to be doing things that you haven't even heard of before. Totally crazy new stuff. So you can do your red teaming. You can have pen testers come in. You can do all the things that you do normally, and those are all really, really great. But at the end of the day, you only have so much budget. You only have so much time. You only have so many people. So anything that you can do to add additional eyes, especially these totally unique new people, is a super big benefit. There are risks. Who here has considered something like this and didn't go through with it? So a couple people. So that's pretty common. It's kind of terrifying to just have random people come and poke at your stuff. Legal needs to be involved. There's PR risk, potentially. A big thing for us, especially with a coordinated disclosure program, is most or all of the things that are being submitted to you are eventually going to be public. So you have to worry about what does your team say in a response? All of their responses are going to be public. The actual ways you're working through a problem is going to be public. It's also a lot of work for your team. Every single thing that comes in has to be reviewed by somebody. That's a lot of work to triage and to decide where it applies. But that's why I'm here. I want to convince you that even with all the risks, even with all the difficulties, it is totally worth it. Initially, when I was planning this talk, I really wanted to target risk-averse companies. There's a lot out there, healthcare, governments, all these industries where there's a lot of red tape anyway and a lot of things to worry about that can make you not compliant or put you or your customers at risk. I actually saw some folks from the automotive industry talking last year and seeing how much they want to be able to do stuff, but they're tied back by all these other factors. So my goal today is to show you that even with all that, it's a net benefit, it's worth doing, and it will be a drastic improvement for your team. So here's the big thing. No matter what you're doing, no matter who you are, no matter what industry you are in, you're already being hacked. The big thing is, without a program, you're never going to hear about it. If you have a program, good people aren't going to avoid you. They're going to come and tell you. So really, you're not losing anything by opening it up. You're losing all of the good people skipping your program, being afraid that something's going to come back and bite them if they submit something to you. And then you're also hopefully going to defer some of the bad people doing that stuff. Somebody on my team actually mentioned a good point. If you're doing something malicious, you want the shortest path to cash you can get. You're not always paying money. Even with a program like HackerOne, you're not always paying money. But reputation's big, and even small amounts of money are a whole lot easier for people to want to submit to you and get, than trying to go through some kind of black market way or share it with friends. So what should you expect if you decide to open one of these up, whether it be an actual bug bounty program or just an email or any way for people to submit to you? Well, you're going to get some absolutely terrible reports. We have seen things all across the board. It might be people who just can't communicate well, whether that's a language barrier or people who are new to the industry or people who are just really bad at putting their thoughts down on paper, even if they have a good finding. We also have noticed swarms of reports, similar reports coming in at the same time, which is a really strange thing. But often you'll see the same class of report come in simultaneously. So there can be a lot of noise. But at the same time, you can get some really, really amazing stuff. Things that you, your team, may not have ever even heard of before, even if you keep up with the news, even if you are super security conscious. You learn a lot by seeing the types of reports you get and the methodology that these people use. So I want to talk about some examples that we've seen. And this will be kind of the second half of my talk today. We, over the last two and a half years, have had close to 200 reports, I think, that have come in via our program. Things tackling every part of our stack. Things that some we've paid for, some we haven't paid for, but all really, really great things that have actually changed how we've thought about our products and how our products have been put together. So to start with, mention we're a SaaS company. What you may not have realized is that stands for SSRF as a service. So what is SSRF? It's server-side request forgery. It's a way for somebody to make your server call out to something that you don't expect. Interestingly, we actually do this intentionally. We have multiple products that perform requests for people intentionally. What's not intended is accessing internal stuff. We don't want people hitting our own endpoints and things like that. But as we know, it's hard. So this is an example of one of our tools that reaches out and does these requests. You can plug in an endpoint. You can have it do a GET or a POST request. It'll just reach out and try to hit something that you want it to hit. And this is super useful if you want to test monitoring a website, things like that. Interestingly here, though, on the right side, it's a little bit tough to read, but that's the request they're trying to make, and that's actually an error message that's coming back. This enterprising individual is trying to access the Amazon Web Services metadata endpoint. Thankfully, we filtered that, so those are 3 blocked error messages. But have you ever heard of zip.io? Has anybody heard of this before? Good, you learned something today. So this is a neat little tool. What does it mean for our prior example here? Well, this is what it does. You take an IP address, you prefix it in front of zip.io, and now you have a resolvable DNS name for that IP address. Anybody can do this with DNS, but this is a really quick little way to do it. So naturally, that breaks every filter that we have in place. So the same person took that example, typed in zip.io, and then of course they can access the metadata endpoint because we didn't filter for that. In the end, they actually went on to write a proof of concept for this where they were able to completely download and exfiltrate that information using the larger scripted interface to that. So yeah, but who would ever think about that? You know, that's a totally unique situation. We had blocked the IP, we had blocked that endpoint, never even considered the possibility that you would have something like this happen. The end result, though, is that we improved our filtering. We have a canonical way to determine where these things are going now, and it improved the company across the board, all via a submission we had through our bug biting program. So similarly, we have 127.0.0.1. It's your local machine. You tend to have services running on your local machine. Did you know that there are other ways to write 127.0.0.1? We have dot decimal notation. We have hexadecimal. We have octal. there's also dotless decimal notation, which, as it turns out, also ends up breaking all the filters. Yet another thing that I personally had never considered, I'd never even thought of, but coming back to having a canonical source to reach out to, improved our product, improved the way we do things, and kept us safe. It's also really cool to read these and then go back and use them yourself if you want to go and do some hacking on your own, because these are really cool techniques. So we had a really neat one come in from Albino Wax, who is one of the researchers at Portsfigger, who makes Burp Suite. He, as he does, was messing around in Burp Suite. He found one of our endpoints had kind of a weird rewrite rule in our load balancer there. This actually resulted in a pretty awesome conference talk called Cracking the Lens. If you haven't read it or read this paper or seen the talk, I highly recommend looking it up. But what's really neat about this is these bug bounty programs aren't just a force multiplier within our company. These are actually industry-wide force multipliers. This bug that he found turned out to be an Apache bug, which then ended up as a patch against Apache. So we fixed it on our side, we submitted it to Apache, Apache fixed it, and everybody got to benefit from something that was submitted to our program. So we are a SaaS company. We're also an IDOR as a service company. We are a huge company, so we have a lot of products working together. It's tough to make sure that everything is doing what you expect it to. We have so many products doing so many different things, intermingled in so many different ways. It's a lot to keep track of. And with 10 years of history, it's always difficult. We also have a lot of tiny startups within our company. We're kind of a unique space that we're not one big company doing one thing. We're a whole bunch of groups operating pretty independently of each other. And we have some really smart engineers. We have some of the best engineers in the industry, and I don't say that sarcastically or blowing smoke up anybody's ass here, but we have some really bright people, and even those bright people miss stuff. So one of our top contributors is somebody who works at HackerOne, Mr. John Botterini over here. He is really good at finding exceptionally weird stuff. He noticed a while back that he could enumerate the full names of users within our accounts, not obfuscated. So by adding the right combination of things, if we had a user account on our already existing within our system, he was able to reveal the full name, which is a big deal. We don't want that to happen. So we fixed it after we got that submission. Or so we thought. So we had a resubmission of that same bug. We had multiple other resubmissions of that same bug. I believe he referred to it as the gift that keeps on giving. So this was an interesting case because these things kept popping up. And what does that tell us? It tells us we're not actually fixing the underlying problem. So once again, we could have just filed a bug. We could have filed one for each one of these. But what ended up happening is we went and talked to the team. We discussed what was actually going on with this situation. And we made an effort to have a real correction to the root problem that actually spanned out to the entire company. Something that without having these reports come in, we probably wouldn't have even caught, let alone had a comprehensive fix for. Oops. There we go. So Synthetics is actually a Selenium driver. It really is just RC as a service. Like we're intentionally running people's code within our infrastructure. Interestingly, this is one of the very first things that we started paying money for with our bug bounty program. And it was a little bit of a risk for us. it actually got quite a bit of attention when we took it live. So we have a sandbox in place within this. People can write JavaScript. It ends up in this Selenium driver. It runs it. It does things like the one I mentioned earlier where he was able to get the metadata stuff. They write JavaScript. It makes requests. It navigates through websites. It does a lot of stuff, just like you were using a browser at home. But we have a sandbox in place to keep people from doing nasty stuff. The goal being that they can't run things we don't expect. But I say sandbox with quotes because JavaScript is really tough to sandbox if you actually want to do anything useful with it. There are so many possible things you want to do and so many things we want to do with our product that trying to sandbox everything and catch everything, every side case, is basically impossible. So we actually ended up paying out a lot of money. So this is an interesting one. Here's our sandbox. Do you see a problem here in this script? So there's our sandbox, deactivated. We ended up actually paying out thousands of dollars on sandbox escapes like this. This one was painfully obvious. By the time we realized like there's going to be more and more and more of these, there's every possible way somebody's going to be clever and figure out how to get out of a JS sandbox. We did the same thing as we did before with the alerts names. We went and talked to the team, and we came up with a solution that was actually comprehensive and would cover all of these different cases, not just specific cases. In the end, we actually ended up putting app armor profiles around these. So the JavaScript sandbox is more of a guideline than anything, but we have a much more robust solution that wouldn't have come about had we not had these submissions come through. So the final thing that's been really helpful for us is keeping our documentation accurate. So our customers do a lot of things that we didn't necessarily ever intend our products to have done with them. We give people a lot of power to do things like write their own code, embed our APIs. But we do try really hard to document all the places where we're doing anything potentially weird. So when we collect data, we're very specific about what we collect. We do everything we can not to collect additional data that's a bug. Our most important thing, though, is we just don't want to surprise people. We don't want to surprise people within the company. We don't want to surprise our customers. We want things to be very specific. We want people to know what they're getting into. So what happens if our documentation's wrong? So we have a concept called restricted accounts. And restricted accounts are accounts that basically operate like kiosks. They're just read-only accounts that a lot of customers use. It's not a real security feature. It's more of an account control to help you do some things like kiosk work. But we do document it heavily, and we want people to use it, and a lot of people like it. So same person I mentioned before from HackerOne has come up with some super clever techniques for figuring stuff out with burp. And he came up with a lot of situations where restricted users weren't quite as restricted as we expected. So here we can see the account license key is pretty important. That's how you send data up. Restricted users can't see it. They can only read what's already in the account, but they shouldn't be sending new data to the account. Well, he found out that if you just go to the right page and go to install, it actually just shows for you, even if you're a restricted user. So by navigating around, by looking for the license key that's there, he was able to find this in a totally random place that the team didn't catch, that we didn't catch. But it did show us that we were out of compliance with the documentation we had in place, which means customers weren't getting the experience that they expected. So to finish up, anybody here who doesn't have some kind of vulnerability disclosure program, consider one. It has been such a massive benefit for us compared to all of the other resources that we have to get submissions. Look at the disclosures that are already out there. Look at ours at that page. Look at big companies who have had a lot of disclosures. Shopify is a great example. See the kind of stuff that they're finding. And engage with the companies that are already doing it, like us. Come talk to me. It is absolutely terrifying, as I mentioned before, to have random people on the internet, people you've never met, people you might not ever meet, that may not even have credentials, may just be an anonymous username. Having people like that poke at your stuff is scary. But it's already happening. If anybody wants to look at your stuff, they're already doing it. It's just best to know. Also, if you're a hacker, come hack our stuff. And if you're a hacker looking for jobs, come talk to us, because we want these kind of people that are submitting stuff to us. So, thank you. Do you have any questions?
Bug submission programs, do you ever see like an NDA pop up before you submit, or you slide an NDA in there, or does that discourage submissions?
Yeah, so the question was, are there NDAs for submissions to our program or any program? We don't have NDAs, and a big part of the methodology is that if it does come into our program, it's going to be public eventually. But there's some guidelines to people submitting, generally who like join a program like HackerOne. There's some like kind of bug buddy etiquette, I guess, like don't disclose it beforehand. We do have a policy in place that is kind of our rules of engagement for that. The policy says, give us time, don't just disclose it. I think a lot of people operate off of like the Google methodology where they wait 90 days or whatever, but there is no explicit NDA. It's a lot about reputation. If you're the kind of person who's just going to go spam it everywhere, we're probably not going to want to talk to you as a researcher. And I think a lot of the researchers don't want to be in a position where they're looked at negatively like that. Almost universally, our experiences have been really positive with people, and even the ones that weren't super positive, there's a mediation process for that. There's a lot of kind of guardrails for a lot of that stuff to keep it from being too painful. And it's not that onerous for somebody to submit. They follow the guidelines. They pick the product or domain or whatever they want to start pen testing against. If they don't see it there, they can message us and ask why it's not there. But generally, I think the idea is you put everything in scope, you let people submit whatever they want, and then you kind of take it from there. Anybody else?
Yeah, a manager of mine suggested that we need to match the black market rates for these rewards or whatever. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I was actually discussing that earlier. I think there are probably situations where that's going to be a problem. You know, if you have an iOS jailbreak bug, you're probably going to take it to some, VUPN or somebody like that and make $1 million off of it. But for most of our stuff, if you find a cross-site scripting bug or a CSRF or something, you could probably make some money off that somehow. But you can make money right away if you submit it to us. You'll gain some reputation. You might get invited to other neat stuff. The kind of things that I've seen that we have had come in are pretty intense. We've had some really good bugs come in, and those people decided to submit to us. These are on par with the assessments that we've gotten. So I think there's probably situations where that's actually a concern, but I think for most people it's not. Apple, Google, where nation state type level things are coming in, but I think for web app stuff and most of what we're dealing with, it hasn't really been a problem.
Yeah, but they're not $1 million items, but there also need to be something that's sustainable.
Yeah.
Make it worth your while.
Yeah, and I think there's some cool controls around that for being competitive. So you can see what everybody else is paying out. So if you're a company who's only going to pay out, say, $20 for a cross-site scripting bug, people might not spend their time on you. But they can see that ahead of time. So before they submit, they can kind of see like we have a table written out that shows what we pay for different classes of bugs. They can also see all of our prior reports. So it's up to the hacker if they want to spend their time to even research it in the first place. And if they do that, they're probably going to submit it to us. If we're not competitive, we're probably going to get fewer submissions, and we'll control for that. But the overall ecosystem, I think, kind of balances itself out that way. I think
The big thing with submissions is that you know you're going to get you don't have to worry about with the price. I work at Mozilla, and we pay in the tens of thousands for really hardcore stuff, and somewhere as low as 250 for some kind of minor things. But that's probably 10% of what they would make for an escape for our sandbox or something. And so the real thing is that as long as you can prove you did 90% of the work, you don't have to calculate IDXC every time. As long as you can show you're accessing uninitialized memory or something like that, then we just write you a check to pay that. We make the effort easier generally the way you get those. They'd rather get $10,000 50 times than have to write one and get maybe $100,000 for an extra 300 hours of work.
Yeah, we operate the same way. So that was if somebody submits a bug, it's about the potential, not necessarily about what they submit, and we do the same. It's if somebody submits a key and they weren't able to do anything with it, for example, we would research and find that out and pay out what the max is. And yes, that's a good example. People want to submit, they want to engage with you, and yeah, and they want the path of least resistance for sure.
So you don't require a full-blown proof of concept, or maybe give more money if they have a full-blown?
If somebody doesn't provide a proof of concept to us, they'll need to have some kind of bare minimum so we can at least reproduce the issue they're saying if it looks out of place. But they don't necessarily need, if somebody gets access to a service or something, we don't necessarily need to have them just rifle through our whole infrastructure. It's seeing if they open a door, what does that door do? And we try to evaluate that. And if we are wrong, if we think we probably can't do anything like this, we might come back and say, why don't you try something else or see if you can take it further. But then it's in that kind of controlled environment.
How do you get some sort of, I would say, sanity or accountability around these hackers? Like my brother in India, he knows this 15-year-old guy who's on HackerOne, he's on other sites, and he's making a lot of money. He's put his age as 25.
So honestly, I don't care how old somebody is. I don't care where they're from. The question was, well, how do we hold hackers accountable if we don't know anything about them, if they're a real person or not? It doesn't really matter as long as we can understand and reproduce the report coming in. It makes us happy. That's on the platform to care about. And I think that there are a lot of really bright folks from all over the world of all different ages doing this kind of stuff. And I think the more of that we have, that's my favorite thing about all of it is these completely radically different opinions that you get from people who don't have formal training necessarily, don't look at things the same way that you do. They're going to see things with a completely different point of view than you or your researchers. So it's great. And also, there is a reputation system, I think, through all these different platforms. If people are acting in good faith and are making good submissions, they could be 15, they could be 50, it doesn't matter. If they're rising up the ranks of their kind of reputation, that says something about the kind of stuff they submit.
The only reason why he had to give this age is 25 is that a lot of companies that list themselves on HackerOne, they have strict age requirements. He's like, who's going to come and check me in India? Nobody can.
Well, have him come hack on us. He can. Yes. So the question was, if we have a bug that comes in that does have a real vulnerability, and the company wants to accept that risk, how do we respond to somebody? So if there is a real risk, we're the ones making that determination, and we have really good buy-in through the company to trust us and to accept that we have judged that for that to be real. If it comes back that we don't think it's severe enough to do anything about, that's on us. I mean, we're making that choice, and we will reflect that back to the person. We'll tell them. We are not in the business of like taking things on like that unless we have a really good reason to. And if we didn't file something, if we decided that it was going to be something we just kind of ignored, there would have to be some other control around it. I think we're really lucky that we have that buy-in from the team. Now we have had things where it doesn't appear that there's really any security implication. It might be a weird thing. Maybe you can break the UI locally if you do something strange. It's not really a security bug. It is a bug. We might file it as a bug and let them know that. But we're as honest and straightforward as possible as we can be with that stuff. And I think it's a big reason why we get as much engagement as we do in our program, is we're pretty transparent about a lot of that. And I think if you talk to some of the hackers out there, they would probably say the same. You know, depending on what company you're dealing with, you may or may not get that kind of response.
Coming back to what you just said, actually, like Slack, for example, gives away their whole customer list for the world to see. It's company name.slack.com, whoever is their customer. If that URL stops resolving, that companies divorce Slack and they perhaps moved on to Microsoft Chat or something.
Yeah, and that's a good example. Like if there's something like that is, so if you have domain mycompany.slack.com, clearly you know that company exists, or at least somebody decided to steal that name. That is an accepted thing, and if we had something like that, we would say it's working as intended. Like, this is an intentional feature. We'd probably have it documented somewhere as some kind of accepted risk. But we'd also have to be confident in saying that, because if we do disclose that report, that conversation is going to be there. So we want to be pretty confident that that's the right answer, the right way to go. Anything else? Yes.
So the premise of the discussion is having a bug bounty program sort of picks up where penetration testing ends, where the road ends for penetration testing. Have you found an exploit or a vulnerability such that then gets looped back into a common penetration testing tool, and therefore would sort of be beyond the scope of a bug bounty program?
That's a good question. I wouldn't say, first off, I wouldn't say that the bug bounty program necessarily picks up where the pen testing leaves off. I think there's a lot of crossover. We have gotten very similar reports from like a pen test company versus what we had come in. Can you repeat the second part?
Any case where a vulnerability or an exploit gets reported back to one of the companies that produce tools for penetration testing, such that
Yeah. So I don't think we've ever had anything like that would have been useful for to talk to Portser or somebody like that. We did have the example, like I said, with Apache, where we've done like backported patches. I don't know if there's been anything specific. Well, I guess we have had a little bit. So the port server one I mentioned earlier that AlbinoX found, that actually became a burp plugin, which he wrote his talk and he wrote the white paper on that after he made the plugin for himself, got all his bounties, and then publicized that. So we have had those, but I don't know if any have resulted specifically from our program. Yeah. Yes.
Was in the talk earlier today, I was covering MITRE as a useful tool to learn about hacking techniques. And that kind of focuses on the later stage of the kill chain. And it seems like most of the bug bounty programs out there, you're really just getting to the point where you have that access. Can you foresee an opportunity in the future, whether it's a private bounty system or some other way, for companies like yours to move beyond the first couple stages and
well, come work for us, and you can see it. So I think knowing the methodologies, OWASP Top 10, all that to actually get in is super important. And I think we could probably see a situation where people could see more of the other side if we did private type bug bounty things. There are mechanisms for that, and we've talked about that a little bit. So when we first started doing our paid program, we didn't have that public at all. We invited people in, and we were also pretty frank talking with those people. If they had questions about how things worked, we would tell them. Same with like the mitigations here that I talked about today. If you're ever doing a bug bounty program and there's something that's unclear, try to engage with them on Twitter or Slack or whatever, because we want you to find stuff that you may not see, and we might give you clues or at least explain how like the architecture works. In terms of actually seeing it from the other side, I could see more like deeper collaborative penetration testing stuff happening where you would see it from both sides. There are some like live hacking events that like HackerOne puts on, where you're actually sitting there with the security team at the same time, and then you have like face-to-face where you're doing that. So I suspect there's going to be a lot more of that, but I think we're still pretty early in the adoption phase, which is why I'm here. Yeah.
Is a internal red team considered complement or competition to bug bounty?
So coming back to what you mentioned, I think they're a complement. So an internal red team is going to be doing a lot of the same stuff we would expect from a bug bounty program. I would say for red team, it'd probably be more like network level stuff, not necessarily like AppSec stuff. But whether it's a red team, whether it's our own team, or an assessor that we have come in, we're expecting the same kind of reports from a bug bounty program. We're letting them hit the same kind of stuff. The only difference is we're not handing our source code away to random bug bounty people, so they're getting more of a black box. Yeah. All right, we probably have time for like one more if somebody wants to throw anything out. All right, thank you very much.